and then two-year term, but we're just going to move through them all together for ease of moving things along. Jim Slonoff is here tonight from the Hinsdalean. Ken Knudsen is here. We're going to try to get this up, a video up as soon, maybe. We may be getting a video up. We hope. We hope we're going to get a video up. We like print. And we have our wonderful moderator here tonight, Ben. He asked for that introduction.
For those of you who weren't here for the first one, she did the whole bio for the whole station about every reporting trip and Emmy, and we're just like, all right, just say Ben, WGN, please watch at 4 p.m.
Oh, you suggested it.
Yes. Thank you so much. Just a quick note for those of you just joining us. Don't lose sight of what a precious commodity not only volunteers who give of their time to not only serve on school boards and village boards, but run for office, but also what a precious commodity a newspaper like the Hinsdalean is in this community, because it informs, they sit at all the meetings so you don't have to. It brings us together as a community, so I would encourage you to support the Hinsdalean and thank the Hinsdalean team for having us out here tonight. So quickly, how this is going to work, everybody's going to get a 1-minute opening statement, then I'm going to ask the same questions to every candidate. We'll change who answers first. We're going to run down the road, so that way poor Erik doesn't get the first question every single time and have to answer first every single time. There's an opportunity for you all to submit questions. Pam is walking around with note cards. Just wave your hand if you'd like to submit a question. Keep in mind, we will not be asking questions of just one candidate. The question you submit gets asked for all of the candidates. The Hinsdalean staff has chosen the first couple of questions in the interest of focusing on issues that are not only most important to the district and the community, but also we hope will have the widest appeal. So that's a little bit of the inside baseball of how we will be asking the questions we are tonight. For you all, thank you for being with us. Well, let's get started with our opening statements, and we're going to start with Cynthia Hanson.
Good evening, my name is Cynthia Hanson. I grew up in Willowbrook. I'm an alum of District 86. My husband and I have 4 kids, and we currently live in Burr Ridge, and we've been a resident as a family for over 20 years. Professionally, I'm a licensed professional counselor by occupation, and I've worked at several universities in the area, University of Illinois, at Chicago, DePaul University, most recently taught at Moraine Valley Community College. When I decided I needed to be home closer with my family, I ran for the school board at Gower District 62, and have been serving there for the past 4 years. And during my time there, we've been through two teachers' contracts. I've supported our initiative for 21st century learning through one-on-one learning, most recently using e-learning in place during emergency days. That's something that they're looking at in P86 doing this year. I supported our administration creating the first freshman readiness survey for data collection that's administered at the high school at P86. That became a collaborative event between all of the high schools, or all of the feeder schools, and look forward to talking a little bit more about my thoughts tonight.
And just a reminder, we do have a timer. Ken, you did a great job. Cynthia, he will hold up a 30-second warning and then a stop. Go ahead, Erik.
Hello, my name is Erik Held. Thank you all for coming tonight. I live in Westmont with my wife and 3 kids. We're in the central part of the Marker District. I'm serving my 2nd year on the Marker Education Foundation. I'm a first vice president of wealth management at UBS, and I've been there for over 13 years. My work is built on goals-based financial planning, taking finite resources, controlling risk and cost, and marrying it to what my clients aspire to do. I also work with executives on governmental compliance and regulations, and have advised corporate legal teams on long-term compensation. For the past 2 years, I've been recognized by Forbes as one of America's top next-generation wealth advisors. I'm a Central grad class of '99, and I know the strength of the education provided here, and feel a sense of responsibility to preserve it, not just for my kids, but the district as a whole. The district deserves board members who will build for the future, who use every tool in the toolbox, unconstrained by orthodoxy or ideology. My goal is to operate without ego, in concert with the other 6 board members, creating consensus to make certain we don't lose sight of what we aspire this district to be.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Hirsman, and I'm running for re-election to the board. I began my career as a teacher, and after I attained my law degree, I practiced school law for 25 years, representing and advising school districts in student and employment matters, litigation, board governance, and collective bargaining, where I represented the board at the table. The union was on the other side. Now I'm on the faculty of Loyola Law School, where I teach education law and labor and employment law. As a current board member, I served on the board negotiating team for the current teacher's contract, which expires next year. I have been appointed to serve on the board team for the next contract, the only board team member with prior D86 negotiating experience. We hope to continue the successful collaborative negotiating process that resulted in a competitive salary schedule while incorporating cost-saving measures in the teacher's benefits plans. What I bring to the board is continuity, experience, and a lifelong passion for public education. I'm hoping that you'll support me in my bid for re-election to the District 86 board.
Hello, my name is Maron. Thank you to the Hinsdalean and Ed Bradley for the opportunity to introduce myself at tonight's meeting. I grew up in Hinsdale in the 70s, attending St. Isaac Jones and Hinsdale Central. The teachers provided an excellent education, and along with my parents, instilled in me a desire to serve others by their example. Importantly, in my adult life, I have maintained relationships with the D86 community through classmates, work clients, and friends, both from Hinsdale Central and Hinsdale South. By listening and observing parents' and students' opportunities and challenges, I will work to support an environment that provides an excellent education involving outstanding teachers. My professional background and business acumen will contribute thought leadership with the other board members and superintendent. I am qualified for the board position, holding a master's degree and previous board experience with the Muscular Dystrophy Association and at St. Isaac Jones as the former chairman of the men's group, and right now I'm the co-chairman of the Transitional Housing Program. Thank you.
And now, this is incredibly impressive technology from the Hinsdalean, because at WGN, the shot would go out right when we went to it, and there'd be static or something like that. But let's go live to New York. Yvonne.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Yvonne Mayer. I'm running for the D86 school board because whether or not the referendum passes on April 2nd, there will be complex fiscal, curriculum, and communication issues that the next board will have to deal with over the next 4 years. I believe I have the skill set and proven experience as a lawyer and past D181 school board member to work collaboratively with the new board and address these issues in a fiscally responsible manner that will ensure that all the students in D181 in 86, receive an outstanding and equitable education in 88 compliant buildings that meet the needs of 21st century learners. As a 17-year resident of D86 and parent of 4 Hinsdale Central graduates, I have a solid understanding of the issues. I have regularly attended the school board meetings for 8 years. I've advocated on student issues before the board, and I served on the 2 Citizens Facility Task Forces. Tonight, I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Urszula Tanouye, and first I'd like to thank the Hinsdalean for putting together this forum and Turek and to Ben for moderating. Local elections have a huge impact on our day-to-day lives, but not many publications cover these races, so thank you. My background is in science. I'm a graduate of St. Isaac Jones, then Hinsdale South, then the University of Chicago, with a bachelor's degree in the biological sciences, then the University of Wisconsin-Madison with a thesis master's in bacteriology. I started my career at UIC as the fermentation lab director in a research lab in the Department of Medicinal Chemistry and Pharmacognosy. Currently, I'm part of the Stop Stereogenics leadership team, and I'm a learn to swim instructor in Willowbrook Park District. My husband and I have 2 children. We live in Willowbrook. One is in preschool and one is at Concord. I decided to run because I think there needs to be a communication shift at the board. I attended a community engagement session for the current strategic plan back in 2017, where I was very disappointed in the way the data is presented in our community. Better data communication will help all of us make better decisions. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nagla Fetouh. I live in Willowbrook with my husband and 3 future D86 students who are currently at Gower. I have a bachelor's in biology and a master's in secondary education, both from the University of Michigan. Over the years, I've had many experiences. Over the years, I've had many experiences that have helped me understand how students learn. I've taught middle and high school science. I've worked at the Smithsonian, managing the advisory board and developing curriculum around exhibits for teens. For 3 years now, I've been regularly involved and vocally participated in District 86 board meetings. As a result, I was honored to be recommended for and serve on last year's strategic planning committee to help shape our vision for the next 5 years. After this, I knew that the strategic vision will only become a reality with the support of the school board. And I'm driven to be a part of this. I hope that you will support me for the 2-year term. And
Thank you and good evening. And Ben, thanks, and Pam and Hinsdalean, thanks. And thanks everybody who showed up to listen and anybody who might be listening. My name is Marty Turek. I am 47 years old and has lived in Clarendon Hills for 17 years. But I also grew up here, so I attended Oak School, at the then time the Hinsdale Middle School, and I'm a graduate of Hinsdale Central. I have an undergrad from the University of Illinois and an MBA also from the University of Illinois. I've served on the 181 board for 8 years, 2 terms. So what lends me a lot of experience is knowing how school boards operate, knowing how levies work, knowing how we've actually had to hire 2 new superintendents. So there's a lot more to this job than just a referendum. And what I'm most proud about those boards is that we have a balanced budget. We levy taxes that are below the max, and I'm super proud, and anybody who would ever walk into the new HMS would be incredibly proud. So I hope you'll vote for me on April 2nd due to my experience for the last 8 years. Thanks.
All righty, thank you guys for your opening statements. We're going to get to the questions now. I'm going to start with the first question, and that is, how would you describe the role of a good board member? Erik, we're going to start with you.
Oh, sure. So how would I describe the role of a good board member? Well, a good board member is representative of the community, not just particularly the block that they live in, the district that they're from, but from everybody, 22nd Street, all the way down to the Slains River. It's very important right now, especially, that we look at this as one district that has 2 schools. And any board member that gets on there right now, anybody of us here at the table needs to make sure that they respect that and that they respect the representation of everybody there across the board. Board members need to realize that while we set the 40,000-foot view policy, we can't be micromanaging our teachers day in, day out. We can't be micromanaging the administration day in, day out. Now, we have to make sure that we are keeping them held accountable. We can't simply let them operate with free reign, of course. We're the board, we set again that overall policy. But when it comes to the day-to-day stuff, there are some folks out there who want to get in the mix with it. And really we need to make sure that we're focused on that broad policy. We also make sure that we're very fiscally responsible with the resources, because it's not my checkbook that we're writing the facilities improvements checks from. We're going with the taxpayers' money. Everybody here and everybody else represented here. It's not our resources. It's the resources of the district. And so we owe it to everybody there to be as fiscally responsible as possible and maximizing those resources for really what we're all aimed for. And it's that great educational resource, and it's for those great students that attend both schools.
A good board member is a good listener. A good board member is someone who considers all sides of issues. A good board member is willing to change their perspective on an issue that's before them. A good board member looks to find consensus with the other board members. A good board member does not make decisions based on a single personal perspective or agenda, but instead makes decisions based on the long view, what's in the best interest of the school district. A good board member puts aside his or her personal biases in favor of finding the decision that best serves the entire community. A good board member prepares in advance for board meetings and asks questions when the information that's being presented by the administration is not clear. A good board member will put a pause on a decision if the timing doesn't seem quite right to weigh in an informative fashion. These are all things that I learned in my 4 years on the board, things that I thought I knew before I came on the board, but I learned quite a bit serving on the board.
What attracted me to run for the board was I really feel that there needs to be more unity, and I really think with my background in the private sector and then also from volunteering and other aspects with the church, I know with transitional housing, I'm serving with both men and women, and it's important to listen and to respect others' opinions before you render a decision as a group. And what I really find interesting, the dynamic of having the women and the men collaborate, is with women, we make a decision. It's not so much about who gets the credit and the ego. We make a decision and move on. And really, as a board, we're representing the taxpayers. We want the best for our students. And I will do everything that I can to make sure that the board is transparent so that no one is blindsided by any important issues, that they're vetted and that the taxpayer has a voice and a vote in that process.
Yvonne, you're up.
Great, thank you. So a good board member is a good listener, and D86 definitely sits board to listen to the community, because right now the community is very divided on multiple issues. A good board member will need to make sure that the superintendent, the administrative leader, understands the issues, collect data that's appropriate to make recommendations to the board on whatever that issue might be, in order that the board can rely on that data and make the right policy decisions, the right fiscal decisions, and make sure that the students are all provided with equitable education. After all, this is a school district, and we're servicing our students. Whatever decision the school members make, that's always got to be a goal to provide the best equitable services for our students. Now, D86 is in a fiscal crisis, and people are very concerned about if they pass the referendum, how will we avoid having future crises? The next school board has to listen, has to hear those concerns, and it has to keep looking at the budget in order to make sure that we plan for the future, plan for pension reform, plan for the next teacher's contract, and for anything that could impact our ability to continue providing the services that our students deserve. Thank you.
I think the role of a good board member is to make sure that they keep the focus on student outcomes. We have a lot of comments and input coming in from all different kinds of places. And there are other governmental bodies whose job it is to focus on various aspects of our lives. The point of a school board is to focus on the student outcomes and to keep that front and center. I think to do that, we need to have high expectations of our administration to provide good information, to make it easy to read, to provide full information, not just simple averages. And that's one thing that I would push for definitely. I also think that a good board member reflects their community sentiment, not just the loudest voices in the room, but the quiet ones out in the community. And one example that I have from a current board member that I really appreciate is that she had one opinion at one board meeting and stated hers and thought that was very important, went back, talked to her children, and realized that it was just her opinion, not the ones that the students feel. And she came back and she changed her mind and expressed that. And I really appreciated that board member's attention to her community members and to the people that are impacted. I also think that a board member needs to look for points of consensus so that we go forward with what we agree on and keep working on what we don't.
So I think that one of the biggest pieces of being a good board member is making sure that you are a good communicator. And I think, as we've heard from others here, a big part of that is being an effective listener, being an active listener, making sure that you're reaching out to all members of the community, all stakeholders, involved in the school district, that means that we're listening to the community, we're taking the advice of the administrators and the people that were responsible for hiring in, and making sure that they are on top of what it is that they should be doing, and making sure that they are hearing from the rest of the stakeholders that they're representing, which is the teachers and the rest of the administration. That includes making sure that we know what the student experience is like, and really, having a pulse of how all of that is integrated with each other, and what the overall impact of the decisions we make then is on each of those stakeholders, because we need to make sure that everything flows appropriately, well, and effectively. I think that, we're accountable to stakeholders, and so there is absolutely that financial piece of making sure that the finances are in line, and making sure that we're looking ahead towards the future and planning the budget appropriately so that we can be aware of whatever it is that we need to be prepared for. A good board member has both the current context in mind when we're making plans, but we're also looking at the long-term vision, the strategic vision of the district, and ensuring that there is a consistent strategic approach that is in place.
So what makes a good board member? Hopefully I've been a good board member for the last 8 years. But I boil it down to one thing. I think good board members should not have an agenda. I think if a good board member should come with an open mind and be able to address a litany of situations and situations. I think a good board member has to hold the superintendent accountable, because unless you're in education and do it on a regular basis, I don't think anyone has the authority to be telling the superintendent what to do, but hold him or her accountable. And a good board member, I think, has to be conscientious that you're utilizing your neighbors' and friends' money, and you have to be very, very conscientious that it's your neighbors, friends, the entire community's money. So it really boils down to a good board member should not come in with an agenda.
So when I think of a good board member, I think of somebody who comes in open-minded and can look at a system of a very complex district and look at the bigger picture of how the different components of all pieces fit together, should fit together ideally and efficiently. You definitely have to lead and know that you need to lead your personal perspective at the door, because from that point on, when you get elected to sit in that seat, it is district first. Whatever is best for the district is what you should be thinking about first and foremost. You have to be proactive, so you have to really take time and energy and study the different viewpoints of whatever issue that you're dealing with. And in doing that, you need to be encouraging other people to speak their mind and to listen to what they're saying, and have the talent to also listen to maybe what they are not. They won't know the different components, so how does what they're saying fit in with what you're hearing on this end as well? So really a good board member is someone who can reach to the far edges of the district and involve everyone in what you're trying to decide, and know that what you're thinking needs to make sense for the entire district at large.
Alrighty, I'm going to use my moderator's prerogative here and just mix it up. I know there's a lot of candidates. You hear from a lot of people. We're going to do a quick lightning round here. I'm just going to have you raise your hand if you agree with the statement. And I realize that we are entering into some of the more contentious issues now. So I would just warn you that as a reporter, I've dealt with Blagojevich, I've dealt with Rom. So you all are no match. Okay, lightning round. Raise your hand if you are for the referendum. Look at you guys. You look like you're watching a tennis match back there. Everyone get a chance to see? Your arms tired yet? All right, put them down. Raise your hand if you are for changing the school boundaries. All right. Want to get a little workout in? You got to move your hands. Let's get back to the questions. A reminder, if you have questions you want to submit, Pam is walking around and she'll be more than happy to collect those and get them passed up this way. Speaking of the referendum, should it fail, what do you think the district should do? Please be specific. We're going to start with Kathleen.
Well,
Use your microphone for me.
in December, the school board finalized a plan to fund the improvements that need to be made, both life safety and security and ADA accessibility issues. That plan included reductions in administrative staff, reductions in transportation, and as you are all very aware, the high-profile action of eliminating football, swimming, wrestling, other sports, cheer, pom, and some additional activities. These actions were taken with a heavy heart and with great reluctance. But they were done with a fiscal, what should I say, looking forward thinking. If the referendum does not pass, what do we need to do so that we can put in place the changes that our facilities so desperately need? So those will remain in place. Those cuts have been made. They will remain in place. If the referendum does not pass, though, the school board will need to introduce additional cuts because the plan is for 5 years to complete the projects that need to be done. And the cuts that were made were just to address the finances for the first year.
If the referendum doesn't pass, we would work to reinstate sports and other extracurricular activities cut by the previous board, factoring in streamlining or shared resources. And I think of a great example of shared resources is club hockey. Look what's happened with hockey, where the high school teams play hockey now. So we have to be creative in our thought process and think of other alternatives. Along with imposing activity fees for clubs, sports, band, etc., to help subsidize the budget. I'll just talk about football as an example. We might only be able to afford one freshman team. We might have to have a cut for varsity football. Those are the things that we're going to have to grapple with as a board if the referendum does not pass.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I certainly hope the referendum does pass because we owe it to our children, make sure that they continue to have all the activities, all the academics that all the rest of us have had benefit of. We live in a time where kids are trying to go to college and it's very competitive. 20 to 30,000 students per year will apply for 1,800 positions at any of the top universities. And we cannot, as a community, make our kids less competitive in comparison to the surrounding communities. So if the referendum fails, I would like to find a way to reinstate the activities. But the reality is we have to also fix our facilities. We can no longer kick the can down the road. So I'm in full agreement with what the board decided in December when they made the cuts. And we have to fund all the life safety activities. Many of you have probably seen the video of a handicapped girl who has to hobble her way from the basement all the way through the building to get to class. Those students shouldn't have to do that. So I don't know what the solution is. The board, this is where the board is going to need to come together. We're going to need to figure out if we can actually bring some of these activities back, but have to go forward with facilities repairs. And $40 million isn't enough. We have to pass a referendum to get our schools up to par with surrounding communities, or all our property values are going to drop because people are not going to move to our communities to send their kids to our schools, and the rest of us did. Thank you.
Hi. If the referendum fails, there's another opportunity to pass one during the primaries in 2020. And there's another opportunity after that in the generals in 2020 in November. In every neighborhood I've canvassed, the one thing that comes up the most is that these program cuts to sports and co-curriculars are unacceptable. Some of the things that are being funded by these presumed cuts are judgment calls. Some of them truly are required, and it's really hard to piece them out. The life safety A and B were required, some of the C's and some of the other projects were not. So I'm hearing from the community that they value co-curriculars and sports and clubs more than they value completing these projects quickly. So that's one area where I think we can do some negotiating and restructuring. A small rural school can offer a full spread of sports and activities. A large, wealthy district like ours should be able to find the money to do the same. That's basically it.
So I also really hope that the referendum passes. I've been working actively and did last time and this time as well alongside community members to try to encourage people and raise awareness about why it's necessary. And the reality is that the facilities needs are real and necessary and need to happen. So it's also possible that the referendum doesn't pass. And so if it fails, I agree. I mean, co-curriculars are essential for the whole student experience and for a strong college application. So our starting point will have to be the cuts that the board has identified. And I've spent some time talking with our CFO, Josh Stevenson, and Dr. Law and others to really try to wrap my mind around this. And the reality is that our budget is pretty tight as it is. Does that mean that this is exactly what has to happen and there isn't any room to take another look at it? Absolutely not. I think it's important and we owe it to the community, to the students, to take a second look at the budget and just make sure that there isn't anything that could be done differently. The outcome could be the same, it could be different, and it is priorities. There's always going to be something that one group or the other may decide is a necessary thing to cut or not in this type of circumstance. But I think the other piece to it is that as a community, we're going to have to come together and be creative about finding ways to make these opportunities available for our students and making the experience a real one and an authentic high school experience that's meaningful to our students. Thank you.
So, should the referendum fail, there will be cuts. When you understand how the budget and the inability to just raise money due to a PTEL, a property tax extension limiting the factor, you just don't have enough money to go around. So there will be cuts. I commend the current board for the list that they put together. I know they worked incredibly hard on that. I know they spent a lot of hours on that, but you just can't go raise more money. So when individuals and groups say reinstate the proposed cuts, there will be cuts. Are they the exact ones that the current board has? I don't know, but there will be cuts, and I don't think the communities of Hinsdale South and Hinsdale Central deserve not to have a football team. So there will be cuts. What they are, I don't know exactly.
So, sadly, if the referendum fails, I hope it passes. So to date, the cuts that have already been decided are the big sacrifices at all levels. At the admin level, at ESP, the sport, the teachers and class sizes. We've lost things like football, marching band, cheer, dance line, and swim. So if the referendum doesn't pass in April, to fund some of the life safety, we're going to have to expect more of that. As one of 7, if I were to be elected, I would want to take another look at what the plan is going forward. I know they have a vision of what they are going to continue to have to cut, and to just take a look to see if there's a different way to tweak, see if there's any way to reinstate some clubs with some flexibility between the 2 schools, as many activities, and increase minimize the impact on the students with how we have to go forward with the cuts, and then find ways to deliver, the services that we do in an efficient way moving forward that we're further moving past.
I have a little vote yes button here, so you can kind of guess where my lean is, and I raise my hand. I do hope the referendum passes. I hope it passes so that we can have a great facility to match the great kids that we have that go to these schools. Going through the tours here over time with the November referendum, the school looks pretty much the same as Central does, I can say, as when I graduated back in '99. And it looks pretty much the same as when my mom graduated. I won't mention the year, because she's here. I don't want to embarrass anybody or get her to slap me. But the idea is that these schools need these fixes. Now, if the referendum fails, we have life safety, security, and ADA compliance issues that we simply have to provide for. That money has to come from somewhere. The board has made cuts, and they're very difficult cuts. We can't simply say, well, I'm going to return everything back there. I want to return everything back there. Well, I'd love to see these cuts undone, but we have to pull the money from someplace. As Nagla said, as Cynthia said, we'd like to take one more look again at those numbers. You know, we owe it to the students to make sure that we've done everything that we possibly can. But if that money is not there, we have to move ahead. We have to move ahead with you as the community. How can we create partnerships and opportunities to allow our students to shine? We don't want to have a year or 2 lost years or 5 of seniors who simply don't have the same opportunity, who can't present themselves in the same way to college boards, to their new employer. They're going to go to school, right? They're going to go to work right out of school. I had an amazing opportunity, amazing experience at Hinsdale Central. I would hate to think that that same opportunity has been missed because this referendum failed.
Marty, let's do another quick lightning round. Show of hands. Do you believe Hinsdale Central and Hinsdale South are treated equally? From the board? From the...
Equally by whom?
Well, I think in the eyes of priorities and eyes of the board.
Kind of more than I guess.
I think it's not a yes or no question.
All right. Let me ask this. Raise your hand if you've attended 6 board meetings in the last year. Keep those up. Raise your hand if you attended 3 board meetings in the last year. 1 board meeting last year. All right, our next specific question. What specific steps do you think the board should take to better unify the district? Matt, we'll start with you.
I was in attendance at the Hinsdale Central basketball game, and I thought it was great. It was in December or January, and before the varsity basketball game, the Hinsdale South faculty played the Hinsdale Central faculty, and I thought that's terrific. We need that kind of culture and unity. We can also, there's talk that the bands will be traveling together to do a performance. That's going to definitely foster an improved culture and unity. Again, I went to St. as a joke, so I know people that went to Hinsdale Central and Hinsdale South that were my friends, and we didn't look at it as Hinsdale Central versus Hinsdale South. We were part of the same district. I also mentioned to the Hinsdalean that a service project, bringing students and parents together. I did a lot of work in muscular dystrophy. They have summer camps in the summer, and right here in Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, and that could be a great way to get people to volunteer and work together. I would say mostly sophomores, juniors would be ideal for that with their parents. So I go to activities at both schools. I've been at basketball games at Hinsdale South, and my wife and I have been at Christmas concerts at Hinsdale Central, football games and basketball games. And with my background, I'm a middle child. I have 2 older brothers and 2 younger brothers, and middle children are the voice of reason. So, thank you.
Yvonne, you're up.
Yep, and could you repeat the question, because we did have a technical issue
Sure.
and I only heard the first word that you asked.
What specific steps do you think the board should take to better unify the district?
Well, I think that the foremost problem exists between the adults in this community. I've been to meetings where there have been parents of incoming students and residents who don't have kids in either school who come and said that there are inequities, inequalities, racial discrimination, lots and lots of problems. But parents who have kids in both schools don't seem to find that those issues exist. And so I think the first thing we need to do is address the concerns of people who don't even have kids in our district and make sure they understand that both schools have the highest quality teachers and that everybody is trying to find the best education to the demographic of the students that attend each school. We've got to start with the adults because frankly, I think the adults are the ones who are creating this toxic environment that we find ourselves in now. Students all came together a couple of years ago when there was a threatened teacher strike. They came to board meetings, they advocated for the board to please get to a contract with the teachers so that they wouldn't miss extracurricular activities, which would have been canceled if the teachers had gone on strike when sports season started. So again, I think we need to start by addressing the concerns of the adults and making sure that they understand that there is no reason to fear going to one school over the other. Thank you.
One of my biggest priorities is to continue what the board has already begun in curriculum alignment. So I think that gets a bad rap sometimes because people feel like it's going to be the same exact material being taught throughout the entire student body, and that's not what we mean by curriculum alignment. It's getting together all of the English 4 honors teachers and asking them, what skills do you want your children to be taught by the end of the course? What skills should they be able to master? And doing that for every class throughout the entire district to create one program of studies that's accessible to everybody. Right now we have 2 programs of studies, one for each building. And if you happen to live on one side of the border, you don't have access to some of those classes in the other. And we need to change that because we're one district and we should have access to everything. Another way to unify is to stop treating our district data on a per building basis. That was one of the things that bothered me the most about that strategic planning session, is that no matter what the data was, everything was separated by building. You had a difference in attendance of 99.2% and 99.0% of people could nitpick that 0.2%. I don't think it's always appropriate, and when it's not, we need to treat it as district data, not building data. I'd like to see distributions because we have a wide distribution of abilities and skills and needs between our 2 schools. It's not building specific, it's population specific. You have high achieving students in both buildings, you have high need students in both buildings, and all of those need to be addressed.
So this topic is near and dear to my heart, and as many of you know, I'm running alongside Slade, and this is one of the things that we really prioritized and talked a lot about. We have 2 incredible schools in our district. We are one district, and so it's really important that we see ourselves as one district together, but also appreciate the beautiful things that are unique at each of the buildings, and I think that is something we should celebrate. So one of the things that we've identified that I think is just a fantastic idea to implement is this idea of a community task force, where we could try to bring together people so that we have members from every single feeder district who are part of this community task force. And they would meet regularly with community members within their feeder district, and then they would meet regularly amongst one another from all of the feeder districts together and communicate and share their experiences and share their concerns and learn from one another. And board members and teachers and administrators should also be part of this so that we're all sharing and creating this collaborative, collective vision for the entire district together, and that can help shape what it is that we want to see happening in our schools and in our district together. I also think that there are really great ways for us to take cues from our students. When I attend the board meetings and I see the student liaisons who are sitting at the table with the board, and they're sitting there and they're sharing what's happening in their buildings, but they're also talking with one another. You can clearly see that they've created a friendship, a relationship with one another as well. And I think we need to take our cues from the students and help to build this unity.
So I would start with the kids. I'd start with the students and figure out activities we can bring them together. It could be fundraising, it could be charity, it could be intramural sports. Because when I attended Hinsdale Central, we didn't have that animosity at the student level. I knew a lot of Hinsdale South kids, and we commingled a lot. And I think someone else touched on it. I think a lot of the decisiveness is at the adult level. So let's start with the kids, bring the kids together with a number of activities, and hopefully the parents will get in line.
So I'm part of the slate that Nagla was talking about, the lead task force for my fellow folks to talk about. Another idea that I had, aside from just taking ourselves and making ourselves available to all areas of the district, is to also consider having folks from Central come and see some of the great things that happen in South, and folks from South come and see things that happen in Central more deliberately and with more intention. So, because we know we have 2 great schools, we know we do phenomenal things, very different things at each school. To find a way to use what people see and by word of mouth get a more of a positive framing of the way we talk about our district, our one district, and let that ripple through the community. I think we have it in us. I absolutely believe that. And I know that I agree that the kids, the students, they don't seem to have a problem. They have a great time visiting each other's friends and going to each other's activities, games, what have you. The other idea more at the top that I have is that I would like to see our superintendent be visible and available and maybe spend a few days over on the south side to be accessible, walk the halls, and just be able to be seen in both schools, and so that they are able to kind of get a general idea of what both buildings look like during the day as well.
So I'm also part of the slate, so the community task force idea, superintendents of both schools, having office hours there at both schools. So great ideas, that we have looking to put into action kind of right from the jump. Another idea is when we take a look, and I mentioned earlier that we have a very big district here. We cover a lot of real estate. And something that we can do going forward to create more of a dialogue is to have a sort of rotating set semi-annual town hall. It might sound kind of boring at first, but so whenever, if we want to communicate with the board, what do? We go to a board meeting right now, maybe we send them an email. We go to a board meeting, we get up there for 2 or 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes if there's not a lot of people talking, and we tell them something. And then maybe a little bit later they address us, maybe a little later they don't. But a lot of people right now have been saying they don't feel that they've been heard. They're not being listened to. They feel disenfranchised. So how can we create that better sense of we're listening to you? And the idea here behind a town hall, in compliance with the Open Meetings Act, of course, is to get out there and engage in that dialogue, a meaningful dialogue with the community. Not saying that everybody's going to have a half an hour up there at the podium to talk to us, but they're up there and they're saying something, and then we're answering back right there to them. We're engaging with them right there in the moment, and maybe sometimes it's frustrating, maybe sometimes it's great, but at the very least, we're getting around there. And these town halls are not in one fixed spot. They're rotating around the community. So everybody feels included, because inclusion is very important right now. You have people who simply are sitting on their hands. There are the quiet voices that we mentioned that don't really feel that they're being heard.
As a board member, I don't see the friction centering around the children. And I think it's really, really important for parents to realize that they set the examples for their children. It is not a productive experience for our schools to be in competition against each other. We should be celebrating the uniqueness of each school. And for those of you who attend one school and have not had the opportunity to take in the events at the other school, I welcome you to it. And this is one of the benefits of being a board member. I get to see what goes on in both schools. And I walk in each school and there's a unique flavor to each school that needs to be celebrated, and this is what we should be focusing on. We need to ensure that all of our D86 students have full opportunities to participate in the academic courses and the co-curricular activities that match their interests and that support their career paths. And this is what we should be focusing on, rather than comparing one school to the other. We should be celebrating the wonderful, unique aspects of each school, and parents should be looking at their children and seeing how their children enjoy their particular schools, and should be taking a lot of comfort in that.
Okay, another quick lightning round question from our audience. Show of hands now. How many of you have toured both buildings to see specifically areas that would be impacted by the referendum? Raise your hand. Alrighty, everyone get a chance to see? Our next question from an audience member. If you are elected, what is the #1 priority you hope you and your peer board members accomplish during your term in office? Yvonne, this question starts with you.
Well, I certainly hope the referendum passes, and I'm going to be hopeful that it does. So my #1 priority will not be passing a referendum. It will, however, be achieving curriculum equity. There's been a lot of dissension in the community, a lot of concerns that there are differences between the way courses are being offered at both high schools. And I've regularly attended board meetings for the past 2 years where the board and the administration represented that that was not the case. However, in late December, early January, we learned for the first time from the administration that there were in fact areas of misalignment that were not completely equal between both high schools and within individual high schools. And that is work that needs to go forward. Now, for example, textbooks are being used differently. They're for the same class. For example, my daughter took a history class for junior year. Teacher who was going between both high schools, and depending on what school he was in, he was using a different textbook. That makes no sense. So I also know there are concerns with the science curriculum. So I think at some point we need to, this board is going to need to make sure that there are data-driven decisions, that if there are curriculum changes, that they make sense for students, that there will only be made changes if they're going to increase student performance, and hopefully that will also minimize some of the dissension that currently exists in the community. Thank you.
Mine is basically the same as Yvonne's. My first priority is that curriculum alignment, because I think we have so many resources existing in our schools that are centered around one teacher here, one teacher there. We should be able to all get together and say, okay, among us, we all teach the same thing. What things are we finding? What skills can we help each other learn? I was fortunate enough to have a manager who came from public education. And the two things he emphasized were, how can I help you do your job better? And how can we share skills so that we all become better teachers? And that's something that I would like to see us doing, getting our teachers together to agree on what they expect from their students. There's no reason for us with 4,000 students to say that one population has one set of skills and one population has another set of skills. There are distributions that overlap. We should get them together and help improve both.
So since I've had a chance to talk about the unity piece, that is one of my top priorities. I'm going to actually touch on the curriculum equity stuff too, because that for me, given my background in education, that is really, really important. And I'm excited to see that the district is tackling this curriculum equity project. I think it's really important to always take a closer look at the opportunities that we have that we're providing for our students and making sure that all students have access and meaningful opportunities to grow. But at the same time, I think that it's really important for us to take the time to define the terms. Make sure that the conversation is the right conversation that we're having. And I think that when we talk about curriculum equity, the deeper thing is we're talking about access, and we're talking about making sure that we are taking the examples of what is done well at both of the schools, making sure that we are recognizing what works in each school and what the teachers there have spent decades fine-tuning and doing well, but also coming together as a district and ensuring that we have that big picture common alignment that's there in terms of benchmarking, in terms of scope and sequencing, in terms of a common vision, and what it is that we want to drive our students to achieve. But as a board, I think that our role that we would play in that would be to make sure that everyone is on the same page when we're talking about curriculum, when we're talking about equity, and when we're talking about the big picture pieces so that the outcome is something that benefits all students.
It goes back to my opening statement. I don't think there is just one priority because there is a lot of things. But if you boil it all down and pull everything apart, we're there to educate students. There are young men and women who we're there to educate. So the number one priority is to make sure that we continue to have academic growth. We have incredibly high performing students. We have to make sure that we're continuing for academic growth. So many things, but that would be one thing I'd absolutely focus on every day.
District unity was also, I think that I was really interested in trying to discuss that. So I also talked about curriculum equity and acknowledge also that it's something that we need to tease out more. That's definitely a big project, and it's on a 2 to 3 year time schedule right now. But to really take our time to define the terms, because the more people that I feel that we talk to, the more you find that we don't seem to be all on the same page with the language just yet, and it's just starting, so we're all in the beginning stages. It's such an important topic, to be sure that we look at other schools that have done it, see how they do it well, and to also know that, again, we have wonderful teachers and have been doing wonderful things with our students, so we don't have to redo everything that we're building out that we do well already. And to look more, this was our pilot year for our one-to-one Chromebook that we use for our students, so looking to how to integrate that with the curriculum project as well, and bring our students into the 21st century ready.
My fellow Slaytons mentioned, of course, we have the unified community. That's a key goal that we have. 3 overarching ideas: driving academic excellence and curriculum equity. And part of that is another thing that perhaps is a little bit closer to me, is ensuring that we have financial stability within the district, while also keeping an eye on the future. So the idea there is we don't always want to feel the sense of urgency and desperation that if we don't pass something so big as this referendum, that we're going to see a deterioration of the quality of the educational experience of our students. How can we make sure that we are not put in this place again in the future? How do we manage expectations also on the other side of that for the community, for everybody out here, for all of our neighbors and our friends, that sometimes a board is going to ask for the community to maybe pay something, in beyond what we are already giving. And already we know that we give a lot. And for me, one of the reasons why I'm running here is because I'm doing this for my kids. And I give, of course, anything for my kids. And so really looking at that financial stability aspect of it, finding ways where, perhaps as we take a look here at curriculum equity, are there ways to align that using, as Cynthia was talking about, one-to-one or e-learning. There are technological ways to implement some of these changes that are at a more financially advantageous to the district than not. And I look forward to serving on the board, being on the finance committee, to putting the over a decade of experience that I have, a variety of in the world of finance, to good use there.
Well, I'm an eternal optimist, and I'm hoping the 3rd time's the charm and that our referendum will pass. But also, as a responsible board member, I need to be thinking about how we can maximize our educational opportunities for our children within our budget. And what occurs to me is we've put in place our one-on-one learning environment, and we have the infrastructure in place, and we have the training of the staff to use technology to enhance the learning experience for students. And this is something that we can do in a very economically efficient manner with limited funds. Now, I'm hoping the referendum passes, and the referendum is for infrastructure and not for personnel. But the reality of it is that if the referendum doesn't pass, that we are really going to be pinching our pennies. And one way we can maximize educational opportunities across both campuses is let's break down the walls between our 2 schools and harness our technology so that we can expand course offerings across campuses by experimenting or engaging in hybrid learning. I do it as a teacher. I teach hybrid learning using a combination of face-to-face and technology. It can be done, and it's a wonderful way to learn, and it's also a very economically efficient way to spread out our resources.
As far as the curriculum equity, I really feel that it should be similar. I don't necessarily think that it has to be identical because of the different dynamics. When you look at both schools, there can be changes in the demographics, and we need, as a board, we need to be responsive to those. So again, not identical, similar but not identical. And then as far as the one thing I really think is important is the alignment of the curriculum with the employment and career trends and opportunities. Engineering, medical, GPs, physician assistants, RNs, dental, information technology, business, aviation, and construction. And within construction, there would be trade school technician skills that students would be learning. And this would help the students and the parents how to go to college. Also, I would like to evaluate the number of AP classes offered going forward and encourage the students to supplement AP classes with taking elective classes, such as a business or be on a debate team, the performing arts, to enhance the soft skills that universities and employers really are looking for. I was at a PEC Expo convention in McCormick Place, and that was an emeritus of the PEC Expo convention. He came and told people that the soft skills are really sought, and I think that we can do that by having the students take those elective classes.
Okay. We are getting very close to 10 o'clock, the time I turn into a pumpkin. You guys want to do one quick question with keep your answer to 30 seconds so we can get this last question from an audience member in, but try to go quick here. Can you share an example of a time when you have had to set your personal opinion aside in order to gain consensus? Ken, give us the 30-second mark. Urszula, go ahead.
So this is actually one of the things that's going around the community right now. I'm a swim instructor. Aquatic safety is very important to me. But what I'm hearing from my community is that there's not a consensus on what that plan should be. And so whereas my personal heart moves in one direction, I'm hearing a different thing from the community, and I feel like we need to respond to that in order for this political process to move forward.
Thank you.
So I served on the strategic planning committee, and I've spoken at several board meetings about this. And one of my big ideas that I'd love to see the district do is try to institute some sort of broad program, an institute of some sort of STEM institute that all students have accessible to them. But I also recognize that timing is everything, and sometimes not everyone is aware of this. And so one of the things that I was hoping to see come out of the strategic planning process is an actual vision for this type of institute in it, but I had to set that aside and work with the group in order to come up with a common vision that benefits everyone.
Yeah, I've worked very hard, and you can go back to the 8 years of tapes. I've never once referenced my kids on a school board because I'm here for all the community. But one thing, there was a decision to replace the former superintendent in 181. I was not for that, but when we finally got to it and elected a new superintendent, I did vote for that superintendent, even though I was not for replacing it. I did that because I wanted to have unity on the board. We had a 7-0 vote in favor of the current superintendent.
An example I have from my time that I served at our District 62 is when we were looking at our budget and realizing we had to make some changes to our programming. And it was a change that I was not that I wasn't comfortable with. I didn't think it was ideal. But then realizing that it was part of the bigger picture again and how it fits in well. So knowing that in supporting it, that it was going to be best for our district as a whole. And then coming in actually after the vote happened the next day, emailing my board president and the superintendent and said, we are here now and we can go, full support with this idea going forward.
So my team at UDS, there are 11 of us, 7 advisors, 4 on staff, managing over $2.5 billion under management. And part of what I've done there is being business manager on that team, and that means staff budgeting. And between myself and the other advisors, we often have different opinions year in and year out on what that sort of compensation should look like. The fact is we have to move together as a team. And as being one that's taken responsibility to get that consensus and get those numbers into management to make sure the staff is paid accordingly, I've had to set aside certain aspects of my own thinking and on how that should look in order to make sure we get the best economic result out of it.
Well, this occurs quite a bit when you're serving on a board. You go into making a decision with a particular perspective in mind and with a particular desired outcome, and then you hear 6 other board members weigh in, and sometimes you realize that the direction you thought it would go is not the direction it's going to go. And I can give an example, and one that is probably pretty high profile, and it's the swimming pools. We've had many discussions about the swimming pools, and the location of the swimming pool was a big issue, but we listened to each other and we made a decision on what's in the best interest of the school district.
When I attended the board meeting last April at Hinsdale South, I went in open-minded. I thought it was a very good board meeting. The citizens that were there that spoke with questions to the board had some really good content in their questions, and I thought the board gave some very good answers. After that meeting, one of the topics that was discussed was rebalancing enrollments. And we know state statistics, smaller schools are better for both. So after the meeting, I wrote the board and I stressed to the board when they make the decision on rebalancing enrollment, safety and proximity to the school, and do everything you can with the public feeder schools to keep those kids together as they enter freshman year, which is a very emotional adjustment. And it's definitely a lot better if they're going in with friends freshman year.
Yvonne, 30 seconds.
So I was on the Citizens Task Force that vetted the master facility plan, pool safety audit, and the life safety survey to come up with a recommendation for the board. There were members from both high schools, or community members from both high schools, and while we didn't all agree on individual categories, we ended up all voting to support going forward on the referendum. And so anybody who says that it was not a community consensus plan is wrong, because it was a perfect example of how the community came to consensus to move the district forward. Thank you.
Well, I don't know how to break it to you guys, but y'all answered the question incorrectly. Because in my view, the answer to the question is, can you share an example of a time when you have had to set aside your personal opinion in order to gain consensus? I believe that's the definition of marriage. Is it not? We're going to do closing statements. Each person will get, I believe, a minute. Nagla, let's start with you.
My extensive background in secondary education and curriculum is invaluable for this role. No sitting board member, nor the other two-year candidate have this experience, which is critical right now during the curriculum project at our schools. Having a board member who understands what this means is vital to be that communication bridge. Just as I have already taken steps to meet with district administration and other board members, I commit to putting in the time to quickly learn the inner workings of a school board. This drive, coupled with my curriculum experience, makes me that much stronger of a board member. For over 2 decades, I have served in many leadership roles to build up organizations through collaboration, understanding, and compromise. I've been a PTO president, managed a teacher advisory board at the National Academy of Sciences, and currently serve as a secretary for the Gower Foundation. Similarly, I want to build unity across all corners of District 86 as a board member. I hope that you'll support my 4-H slate and me for the 2-year term this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben, and again, the Hinsdalean and everybody who showed up. It's a trying time for District 86, and I hope that people look at that experience counts. And with my 8 years of a lot of things in District 181, from balancing budgets to getting a referendum passed after it failed, levying taxes, implementing curriculum. I'm on the facilities committee now. I chair the technology committee. So I hope that you view me as someone who has experience that can step right in, whether the referendum passes or not, and make an impact. So I appreciate everybody who's willing to volunteer for this position, and hopefully I can earn your vote on April 2nd. Thank you.
I like to think of myself as an optimistic person. I look for opportunities and challenges, and right now District 86 has a few that we're dealing with. That being said, I still believe we are a great district. We're a destination place. I think we are very fortunate to live here. I'm a lifelong resident. This is my high school district, and will be the high school district for my kids and my family, towards it all. As a parent, I've told my kids to dig deep, get creative, find opportunity, and be positive. District 86 has always been a great school district and will continue to be as long as our Board of Education continues with their vision to empower students to pursue their ideal future, whatever that is. We need board members who will continue to support initiatives to educate the whole student and all of our diverse learners. We need a Board of Education that supports our schools, and and that looks at ways to build up and not hinder progress. I believe that I have the attributes for this, and that my slate mates and I that I've chosen to campaign with also have these characteristics, and I think will for us on April 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for taking out your evening tonight and coming out to listen to us here. We face a number of issues here as a community. Some of them are stemming from recent debates, others are decades old. I'm running with 3 other terrific candidates here on the 4-H slate. The one thing that we're purposely doing is putting forward unified community as the first item on our Vision 2024 plan. Because a community that supports its schools is declaring with one voice that they support each other, their kids and families yet to come. Second, we are committed to driving academic excellence and opportunity for all students. And with the referendum on everyone's mind, ensuring financial stability must be at the heart of what we are to do. Keeping an eye on the future, managing expectations for other significant asks from the community. Not projects as simply desired or wanted, but necessary to preserve and maintain the high-quality education we offer these outstanding students. We can reflect the best optimism of what our greater academic community can be, even as it's riven with disagreements, misinformation, and an aching feeling of disenfranchisement. I know that our best days lie ahead. Thank you again for listening, and I'd ask for your support for our wonderful 4-H slate.
First off, thank you, Hinsdalean, for hosting this. It's challenging. Questions are challenging. But I think all of us up here are up to the task and improving ourselves. We had some very tough decisions to make in the last 4 years. And a productive school board can make those decisions and implement those decisions. And we certainly have some very difficult decisions ahead of us, especially if the referendum doesn't pass. I would like to continue my service on the board because I bring with me the experience of the decision-making that went behind the decisions that we're implementing now, and the knowledge of the challenges that we have to implement the decisions in the future. And we've established a very good collaborative relationship with our teachers in our negotiations, and that's a very important step moving forward to maintain that relationship.
I have grown numerous brands in the consumer products sector and also in insurance. And will bring a strong work ethic, being present, attending every board meeting. We will act as a transparent board, actively listening to the community's input. This will enable the board to create solutions for the district's needs within the budget allocation. The students will thrive scholastically, athletically, and in other extracurricular programs, representing District 86 very well in college with campus activities and their chosen area of study. I will serve District 86 proudly and always in good faith, and ask for your vote on April 2nd. Thank you.
Yvonne, you're up.
The district is facing many, many challenges in the next 4 years. What you need on the board are people with experience and a solid foundation to tackle these issues productively and move the district forward. As a past D181 board member, I worked to eliminate a $5 million budget deficit without negatively impacting students. And I successfully negotiated a teacher's contract that included a 1-year salary freeze without the teachers going to strike. My past experience has prepared me to tackle D86's fiscal challenges in a responsible way. I believe in curriculum equity and providing all students the opportunities to maximize their academic potential. If elected, I will advocate for data-driven decisions on proposed curriculum changes to ensure that they improve student performance. I'm an advocate of open governance, transparency, and engaging the community in meaningful ways. And I hope that on April 2nd, I will have your vote. Thank you.
I think the thing that I would bring most to the board is to question everything. I'm not a fan of the status quo if it's not where we're supposed to be. If it's working, great. If it's not, let's examine all the options and get good information from our administration to support those decisions. If we're not getting that information, we can't make good decisions. there's a lot of wisdom in our community, and you can't necessarily find that if you don't go out and ask it. That's what I've been actively doing for months, and I find something new out every time I go out. You guys are a great resource, and one of the things we need to start doing is questioning if what we're doing is working or if we need to change.
You guys want to go another hour or two? Let's hear a round of applause for our candidates. Regardless of who you vote for, it takes a lot to give up your time and your talent, and we are very appreciative of it. I'm not good without a teleprompter. Pam, Jim, Ken, the Hinsdalean, thank you very much for being our host tonight. Thank you all very much for coming out and showing your care about what happens in your community. Have a great night.